Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to the Forming the Future podcast series by Michelmersh. This is one in a series of events to talk about the future of masonry, brick, ceramics within the UK and the fantastic contribution that we make to the economy for sustainability and for the future built environment. Today we have with us Mike Leonard, the CEO of the Building Alliance, and we're going to talk about some really interesting subjects focused around that affordability, function, form, those home buyer expectations, and really what we can deliver as a sector and what we have been for many decades. So Mike, without further ado, obviously we've got Emily Herbert with us for the marketing manager of Michelmersh as well. I'd love for you to give an introduction into yourself and the long history that you have with the Building Alliance.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Emily, and thanks for the opportunity today to talk to you through this podcast. The Building Alliance was formed a good few years ago now, and it aimed to bring together the masonry industry in the first instance, and to ensure that we had a clear understanding amongst our stakeholders of the benefits of masonry, both from a performance perspective in terms of the building regulations, but also in terms of building homes with the materials that we produce that are going to last a long time, at least 150 years, and provide comfort and resilience to those people living in masonry homes.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, absolutely. We are constantly banging the drum for longevity and durability of masonry products, and quite often it's overlooked. Obviously, currently we are facing difficulties with the accuracy of data when it comes to environmental product declarations, and that being a study period of 60 years. It just doesn't marry up with the longevity that our products can offer, and really that it's a built environment for many generations to be handed down, and there's real value in that from the built environment perspective.
Absolutely. And, it's a big frustration to me that we choose to measure on 60 years, that we choose to measure imports to the UK at port of entry rather than tracing back their origins and the processes they went to be produced and transported. All of that's somehow ignored. And then if you take that forward and say that we make a product, let's take a brick, that we produce using local materials, often materials that come a very, very short distance, the clays, and that those materials go on to be built into homes that are going to last at least 150 years. And then there's the opportunity to recover those bricks and recycle them and reuse them again. And so when we're being compared to other products, which frankly in our disposal society don't even last 60 years, they last considerably less than that, I find it incredulous really that that we don't think about that real value that producing products in the UK to this standard, with this pedigree, with this ability to be low maintenance and not impact on the environment going forward, is not fully taken into account by government. And you mentioned the data, Sarah. Yeah, the data is unreliable. And that's where I'm really, really clear that before we start to legislate around embodied carbon, for instance, we must have that data being robust. And it is unacceptable that there are gaps in there. It's unacceptable also that we don't consider the true lifespan of the. I think we've also got to balance that with our need as an industry to decarbonise as well. We're not shirking our responsibilities, but I'm very clear on it that where you compare bricks made in the UK using local raw materials to the impact of mass deforestation, for instance, around the world, and the destruction of natural habitats and the carbon sink that those trees would create, there is no comparison. We have something here that needs to be understood if we're not to make some serious mistakes in the journey to a low carbon environment.
I couldn't agree more, Mike. And I think there's, we risk severe unintended consequences if we continue to offshore. We're at risk of decarbonisation through deindustrialisation as well
Yes.
here in the UK. You make a very good point about life cycle analysis too. And we've got to be clear that over 80% of the homes built in the UK have masonry facades. We talked about the durability and the longevity. It's a really important point to balance the embodied carbon with the operational carbon, like you mentioned. But
Yeah.
there's so many other qualities as well when it comes to a masonry facade, such as the security, the sound insulation, the thermal mass, the aesthetic appeal, the conservation requirements that we have, and the availability of materials which we just don't have from those other materials that you mentioned as well, Mike. So it's worrying, but also we must as well still encourage politicians and homeowners that really thinking for the long term is the right approach. It's the most sustainable approach.
So I also have another role, as you may know, as a visiting professor at Birmingham City University, where I head the Centre for Future Homes, and as part of that role, we're very very focused on resilience, very focused on what the future looks like. And in addition to what I've said already, if you play forward the timeline to say 20 years time, the probability is that we're going to see overheating in buildings being as problematic as underheating is today. Overheating is going to become a big problem. And there we need a bit of thermal mass, we need weight in our buildings, not lightweight structures. We're also going to see extreme weather events, floods, wildfires, storms, winds. And all those things call for a resilient, robust building material. A material that we've already got, a material that's proven and has proven for many hundreds of years to be a success. And so we need to start thinking about the long term and also thinking as well about, as I mentioned, the damage we might cause elsewhere. So if we're talking, as we should be, about protecting our planet, we have to talk about our whole world, our whole planet. We can't conveniently forget that the damage we do elsewhere through deforestation, for instance, and the effect that has, we can't forget that. And equally, and you alluded to this, Sarah, we can't have a scenario where we outsource our carbon to other parts of the world. And I would suggest that we've got some real examples of that at the moment. So, for instance, we see our PV product coming in, 95% of that coming from China. We're about to electrify our heating in our homes. And instead of making our gas boilers in the UK, which we do, 95% of our gas boilers, we'll be importing heat pumps from the Far East. Again, massively from China. So we're all the time exchanging one thing for another and suggesting it's better. Our car industry perhaps is about to get devastated by importation of cheap cars. Those cars are going to be made in fossil fuel economies. Yeah. So how does this really make sense in the long term when what we're seeking to do is not just provide resilience in the built environment, but resilience economically? We're in uncertain worlds where we've seen pandemics, we've seen world wars, wars, should I say, across the world. We've seen a lot of disruption to our supply chains. So resilience covers not just the built environment and the product and the performance of the product, but also the economic and social consequences of that. I'd go one stage further as well, because I often hear skills being put up as a reason to change, a reason why we want to go for other methods of construction. I don't really understand it, if I'm honest. I think it's swerving around the problem. Clearly, there's a skills challenge. There is across every sector. But equally, there's an unemployment challenge as well emerging. And with the fast pace of AI and the disappearance of a lot of white collar jobs, what better to do with in terms of directing our young people than to get them into skilled employment, for instance, as bricklayers? And that creates great career opportunities for them that will last a lifetime, and frankly won't be replaced by AI. Again, I use this word resilience, and then I try to paint a picture of resilience, which is far more than what you might first think about it. It's about everything we do and everything in every way we operate and every way we live to make sure that we're doing the right things for the future. Sarah, you mentioned unintended consequences. I have there's three things that the Centre for Future Homes at Birmingham City University stands for. One is to put the customer at the heart of the journey. The second is to ensure that we have the data and the insights to allow policymakers to make evidence-based decisions rather than based on rhetoric and propaganda and all the things that have driven poor decision-making in the past. And the third one is to avoid those unintended consequences. Just a few days ago, I organised the Building Safety Futures conference in Birmingham, where we talked about the outpour of tragedy from Grenfell and the continuing saga where 8 years on, we still got lots of buildings that were clad in materials that were not fit for purpose. They were combustible, they burnt. And so we were talking about how we solve that problem and help lots of people who've been adversely affected by that period. So there's lots of things that we should be thinking about in the round to make sure that that the decisions we make today are fit for purpose for future generations. I don't want us to be in a situation in 30, 40 years' time. Well, I won't be here, but there'll be people criticising the decisions that we made because the homes we built were lightweight of nature and weren't fit for purpose. And you see from other parts of the world already houses floating down roads, etc. Is that the sort of environment we want to be responsible for?
Do you think the awareness of these issues is increasing? People in the industry are starting to realise that we have these challenges that we have to do something about?
I think we take a very short-term perspective on most decision making, including within the industry, if I'm honest. Yeah, and I see people sort of chasing the latest trend rather than absolutely looking to the long term and thinking about and understanding our responsibility, to get things right. So the Grenfell tragedy, is a prime example. First and foremost, it was a retrofit project. We should never forget that. So we took a perfectly safe building, decided to clad it in a material that was not fit for purpose, and 72 people died. That's clearly unacceptable. It was made more unacceptable when you start to listen to the actions of people that have come out through the Grenfell inquiry, and the podcasts are available on the BBC. So we have a responsibility to get it right. We're only custodians at a particular time in a very, very long journey, and decisions we take today have long-term impacts. So I think, to answer your question, Emily, there is a lot to do to persuade the industry to start thinking in those terms and not just trying to fix the last problem that we caused, but rather predict and look over the hill to the things that are coming forward that can cause us problems in the future.
How do you think we as manufacturers can help? What can we do more of?
So I think it's about a collective responsibility. It's very much about working together with others to get messaging into one place, to get clear and simple messages out to the wider audience. These sorts of debates should be taking place on Radio 4 Today programme in the morning, so that people in the wider public get to understand the importance of what we're doing. We shouldn't, and this is important for the industry that we're part of, the masonry industry, if you like, which I feel very much part of, is that we have no reason to be defensive. We have a fantastic solution to the climate change, to the building safety challenges that lie ahead. and yet we somehow find ourselves defending our product and suggesting, rather than getting out there and promoting it. And I genuinely believe that we should be far more upfront about promoting the strengths of our product and our offer and what it does for communities. And that includes the skills agenda, it includes the product performance, it includes maintenance, it includes developing homes that are both comfortable and safe for future generations.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I think you touched on a very relevant point there as well in terms of the data and optimization piece, and that's something that we're hugely focused on over the next few years. Is that absolutely that accuracy of data? Because without the facts, without really looking inwards at what we consume and reducing what we consume first and foremost, the other projects that we are looking on for fuel switching and other alternatives to decarbonise, they won't be accurate unless we've got really good data. And there's also a cultural change piece that needs to be done inward looking as well as outward looking, and that's something that also Michelmersh as a business is going to be focusing on over the next few years. And again, you can have the best data in the world, but if you don't use that to make really informed decisions about how we make our products into the future, then there is no point in having that great data as well. So absolutely that's something that we're now focused on. I think as well, touching upon the skills shortage, you've had some great campaigns in the past. I wondered whether you could talk about the Get Britain Building campaign.
Of course, yeah. So the Get Britain Building campaign was a response to the economic crash in 2008, in fact. So that's when it started. And it was born out of a belief that every single crisis in economic history in the UK has been solved by the building sector, by the building industry. Yeah, and if you think about if we're coming out of the First World War and then the Second World War, one of the solutions was to get everybody building again and rebuild the environment, and so. The multiplier effect of the construction industry is just not understood by politicians. And part of the problem we've got, if I roll forward to today's scenario, 2025, we've got a government that is desperate for growth, but don't understand somehow which buttons to press to get it. And the opportunity that house building and associated infrastructure gives to the economy is just huge. And part of the reason is because we make it here. Yeah. So unlike other goods, unlike on Christmas Day when you open your presents and almost everything's come from China, we actually make it here in the UK. And then we use local people and local skills to install it. And we buy our sandwiches from the local sandwich shop while we're doing it. And so we create this multiplier effect in the economy, which is unparalleled. Yeah. And so that's why we're very, very keen to suggest to government that they really get behind that Get Britain Building message. Clearly, it's not just about new build housing. It's about retrofitting our existing housing stock. So at the end of the day, we have the Future Home Standard. We were promised an announcement in the autumn. We've had a change of minister, so who knows whether we'll get that or not. But whatever happens, we don't build enough houses in the UK every year to make a real difference to the overall environmental performance for the built environment. So to put it in context, we'll probably build around about 140, 150,000 homes this year, which is way down on what it should be. Yeah. And yet the built environment currently is around 26 to 27 million houses currently built in the UK. So when I'm talking to politicians, I say, where do you think the problem might lie? Is it in 130 or 26 million? Yeah. And so how do we make sure that we, and that's a far more difficult challenge, by the way, to get to retrofit. I'm engaged in that process, and it's really, really difficult compared to new build. But it has a similar multiplier to it. And also, when you're building houses, you should be building communities, not just houses. So we have to think about the other infrastructure that's required around that: transport, access to schools, hospitals, education, doctors, all those sorts of things have to be part of that journey as well. So there's, again, a multiplier effect that comes out of that development. And we shouldn't just be building homes, we should be building neighbourhoods and communities. Of course we should, because that's also part of our long-term responsibility to deliver homes that are truly environmentally efficient in terms of having access to ways in which you can travel, for instance, in an environmentally friendly way. So Get Britain Building, I think, is such an important message. It couldn't be more relevant today. And my single most important message to the government at the moment, because they talk a big talk around 1.5 million homes. They couldn't be further away from their target at the moment. The one thing they've got to do is provide incentives to get the first-time buyers back into the market, because without first-time buyers, this housing market doesn't function, and that's what we're experiencing at the moment.
Absolutely. Mike, as well, I mean, you talked before about having that accuracy of data, and we talk about building that confidence that UK manufacturers and the industry can satisfy that demand. Could you tell us a little bit more about Project 80 and the success that is demonstrating that we can achieve the Future Home Standard with masonry products and provide really safe, warm and affordable homes for future generations?
Of course, and I think it's important to say that whenever we have a systemic change in building regulations and the like, there are always those with an agenda who will say, well, that's the end of masonry. You can't use masonry in those scenarios. You will have to change. As I say, they have an agenda, and that agenda is clearly focused on the use of other materials rather than masonry. It's also true to say that the change that we're envisaging with the Future Home Standard change is about as big as it gets. It's a significant change in building regulations. Building regulations tend to be incremental, to grow at a rate. This is a big step change where we're going for an 80% reduction in operational carbon and a move away from fossil fuels for heating. That's the big change, obviously moving to electrification of heat. I've been around building regulations for an awful long time, for a lot of changes. And one of my observations was that we never build it before we implement it, which always seemed a bit strange to me, that we'd embark on a big change without trialling it, without actually understanding whether it worked or not, or what the problems might be. So as we sort of approached this particular change, I chatted to Tony Hopkin at Middle and Hart and said, why don't we build this? Why don't we actually go out and build it to the proposed standard now? And this is back in 2020. At the time we envisaged it, we would have the Future Home Standard by now. We haven't got it yet, but we envisaged it would be in. So let's build it in advance so that when we do implement it, we understand some of the challenges. And why don't we build it based on standard house types that you already produce? So it's an adaptation. So we're not creating spaceships. We're creating homes that people like. And why don't we do some different things on some of the houses so we can try out different levels of air tightness, for instance, or different methods of heating? Because the other thing that's clear for me is that there is no one solution. There's no panacea. There is a requirement to have different performance levels, etc. So that's what we decided to do. We took a site that had been pre-designated to be built to 2-13 standards. It would involve knocking down 2 redundant houses and creating 12 homes on that site. And so it's a brownfield site. And we built using 3 different demonstrator types, if you like, a mixture of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom houses. These homes were for social occupancy. It's in an area of Birmingham called Handsworth, which is a deprived area of Birmingham, I guess. And it was interesting that when we built those homes, 1,000 people applied to live in 12 homes.
Wow.
So that probably gives you a feel for the scale of the housing shortage, if you like. particularly at that affordable end of the market, that social housing end. So we built some houses that went down as low as 2 in terms of air tightness. The walls were all constructed to 0.13 using masonry construction, so we had a common U value throughout the project, different levels of air tightness, and we use different heating systems in there. Recognising that air source heat pumps, which is the government's panacea at the moment, they're important. They'll be part of the journey. They won't be the only solution. And so, for instance, we use a hot water heat pump to heat the hot water and the panel radiators in one of 2 of the properties, because we recognise that that will be part of the solution where there isn't space for heat pumps, for instance. So the homes exceeded our expectations in terms of performance, and we handed them over to the people, and that's when, as part of the research we did, we put sensors into all of these properties, and we interviewed everybody throughout the construction process, and then the commissioning, handover, and then lived-in experience of Project 80. We can roll forward. Those people have now lived in those homes for over 2 years, and the feedback is fantastic. They love their homes, and they are really nice homes, and very, very efficient to operate. However, what you do learn from that experience is, and our estimation is that 50% of the challenge in moving to low carbon homes resides with the way in which they're operated.
Absolutely.
So not just the function. Yeah, not just the function. Yeah, absolutely. So we need, and the government needs to spend a lot of time in that behaviour piece. And in fact, they can almost do that for relatively nothing at the moment. They could get on and do that immediately, even with the existing homes that are occupied that we do nothing to. We could improve their efficiency by educating the public. So we learned a lot around that. The timing of our research in real time was actually right on cue for the government's consultation in 2023. So we were the only project that could feed in live data into that project. So we've been, I think, highly influential in terms of shaping the future home standard when it eventually comes to fruition. And we've learned an awful lot that's built on. And we've rolled that over now into another project with Keep Moat, where we're building 33 homes. We have built 33 homes to the future home standard. Again, played the tune slightly differently, but nevertheless, masonry homes. So if anybody wants to purvey that myth that masonry isn't fit for purpose, we have the evidence to say to the contrary, it absolutely is. And in fact, our next piece of research is to roll those projects forward and start to look at what they're like in 20 years' time, and what other mitigation we could think about overheating. Very different climate where 40-degree summers could be the standard. We can't. It's very hard for us to imagine that, isn't it? But 40-degree summers for long periods of time will change it. Will change our thinking. And overheating is a particular problem that is difficult for us as humans to regulate. It's easier when it's cold to put a jumper on.
Absolutely. You talked about that behavioural change piece, and you're absolutely right. We don't have, very few of us have systems now where we leave a room, the heating goes off in the room, and we're just not used to being that conscious. We probably all do it where we leave the room, we turn the lights off. But we don't have that with our heating system. So you're absolutely right. That operational carbon has to be key, because that will make the most impact to our emissions, won't it? So fantastic work with Project 80. And I think, like you say, it really does give that confidence and that data, that accuracy. Having the home owners actually involved in all of the conversation throughout as well is a really important one. Because it is about them being comfortable and happy with their homes for longevity, isn't it?
Good.
And also, the more they talk about what works for them and how it has been so great for them, that will increase the demand with other end users, which in turn will change the way that we're supplying.
Yeah, completely. And I think one of the things that we've learned from the journey, if you like, is that we know very little about how people live in their homes.
Yeah.
Far more about how they drive their cars and all the things they do. But once they shut that front door, we actually don't know what goes on behind that front door. And so we've got to be careful how we get that information, because we don't want to be intrusive either. But the bottom line is that we do need to change behaviours to move forward. The other thing I think has been quite interesting is, and this was applied to the Keep Mode project, where we were selling the houses rather than providing them through social rent, is the knowledge and experience of sales staff, for instance, and customer sales team about the product that they're selling. And I'd argue that we've been selling homes, for instance, more about the kitchen and the bathroom and the nice school down the road. And we haven't sold the physical properties of the product. And if you do that, and we created a demonstration centre at the site in Nottingham for Keep Mode, and showed them what a 150 mil cavity looked like on the brick. And we've replicated that at the Centre for Future Homes in Birmingham now. So we've got that facility there, so we can show people physically how the building's put together. That's really interesting for consumers, and they get it, they understand it, but they're not being told it at the moment. So they're being sold products that look shiny, but actually the core of that product may not be as strong as it should be.
And it's also about the cost to the homeowner as well, which is really important to address at that stage, because that's often also something that's overlooked. You talked about the heat pumps and alternative solutions now to decarbonise homes into the long term, and there isn't a one size fits all. It goes back to what you were saying before about it's a collaborative approach to systems integration, to technology, etc., that we need to all embrace. So it's definitely something that we should all feel like we're more educated in going into the future. I think another element that we haven't yet touched upon, but is very prevalent in conversations about sustainable homes for the future as well, is circularity. And I think we all need to do a bit more as well to embrace more circular models within our day-to-day lives or within our businesses. And it's quite exciting to look towards the future where we can all start to embrace more recycled materials or waste materials within our products, for example, or as consumers using things much better than we do.
Yeah. So recycle, reuse is just fantastic, isn't it? Really, we hear the sort of the upscaling of products and things like that that are being talked about, but it's got to be right. We've got ourselves into a mindset of being a disposable society, and that cannot be good for the environment. It cannot be, and so. Again, I think it's playing to our strengths and telling the story, and so I think a lot of what we've got to do is about storytelling, interestingly, and making sure that that our messaging is getting through. And it shouldn't be overcomplicated. It's fairly simple messaging that we need to deliver. But I think we have allowed our products to become commoditized. Mm-hmm. We rather than, as I say, going on the front foot and making sure that people understand the true value of what they're getting. And the length of time that's going to last. And I touched on maintenance as an issue. It's a big issue with things like heat pumps and everything. But if you think about the built environment and the cladding of the built environment. It's an anathema to me that, for instance, we might go out and render buildings that are clearly going to need a lot of maintenance in future years, and there's an environmental impact to that.
And it's overlooking that cost as well to the homeowner forevermore, isn't it, as well? And I completely agree with you. It's a short-termism again.
Yeah, and you just think that we've got the brick product will mature with age. And there's not many things that do that, but it will mature with age. That's it's not maintenance free,
No.
completely, but it's a lot less maintenance than other solutions.
I couldn't agree more. And a lovely message, really, to finish on. And Mike, if you've had lots of other initiatives, you've got I Build It, you've mentioned all the work that you've been doing with Steamhouse and Birmingham City University. Is there anything that you would like as a closing remark in order for us to kind of focus our attention towards, as a sector, as an industry, how we can improve, how we can collaborate together? Is there any final remarks?
So, as I say, I think the biggest single challenge going forward for us is, well, there's probably two actually. We need to be conscious about skills, and we need to get close to organisations like Skills England and the like that are forming to make sure that we're not seen as a risk, but more as an opportunity. So, and we need to be more joined up in how we deliver skills. And currently, there's a lot of work to be done on that. But I think it's an exciting opportunity for everybody. And I think it'll become more to the fore when people realise the effect of AI will have on other types of jobs. So I think that it's a material time at the moment. And the second one, I believe, is making sure that we present a cohesive story about our future journey. Yeah. How we're going to decarbonise as a sector, and the steps that we're going to take, recognising that's not all in our gift. So government needs to help us with that, but also at the same time articulating what the alternative risks are. So it's my submission that we're in a place where we can only get better, and our competitors can only get worse.
Thank you, Mike. Yep, I concur completely. And from the first point about skills and craftsmanship, that's really something that we should be honing in for our younger generation. I have 3 boys, and I would definitely recommend that they get their hands on learning traditional skills, because I think that's going to be really important for our future. Absolutely. We're doing some fantastic things within the sector as well on your second point, and we should be shouting about it. But also we need to do more. And we recognise that about how we can all come together to showcase how we really must keep British manufacturing going.
Yeah, we as long as we're on the defensive, we'll never win. Yeah, we win by going on the attack. Yeah. And we've got all the credentials to go on the attack, and we need to do that.
Yep. Thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And this was the series called Sustainable Construction at Scale, with Mike Leonard, the CEO of the Building Alliance, Emily Herbert, Marketing Manager of Michelmersh, and Sarah LeGrady, Innovation and Sustainability Director of Michelmersh. Thank you for joining the podcast, which is one of the series of Forming the Future by Michelmersh, and have a lovely day.
Thank you.